I'm a female in her late 20s, and this happened fairly recently. Nothing bad happened to me, but I'm lucky it didn't, and it easily could have. There's a conservation area that I used to like to walk in regularly. It's beside a golf course, near an ordinary subdivision, just off a busy road. It's popular with dog walkers and photographers. The conservation area is fairly well maintained, and alerts its users that there are hidden cameras everywhere. My point in bringing attention to all of this is to say that by all accounts, this is a very safe, vanilla, urban wooded area in a populated area. One big thing about me is that I like isolation to recharge. I dislike crowded trails, and by convention, go in off-peak hours or when the weather is unpleasant. Not dangerous, but unpleasant, too cold, lightly raining, foggy, etc. I stay safe, but I like there to be as few people around as possible. In a city, in daylight, I don't feel like I'm taking any risks by doing this. The first encounter. There was one day when I went at around 4 PM or so on a frigid, rainy Monday in November. On days like that, there may be only 1 or 2 dog walkers, but today there was no car in the parking lot except for a dirty blue pickup truck with a man sitting in it. I noticed that he was looking at me, but that didn't really bother me. I was just happy to see the trail was empty. On this particular day, I went to the area to practice my navigation skills. I was learning how to use a compass at that time, and it's good to practice that skill in an area that you won't get lost in. So, I decided to go off-trail to a big pine plantation, which is a big open area with large mature pine trees, if you're not familiar. It's not a hiking area, or really that interesting in any way, and definitely off-trail. You wouldn't get there unless you really wanted to get there. So, I picked my first landmark and sight it using my compass, and I'm pacing towards it. I find myself about halfway there when I hear rustling through bushes, and I turn around to see the man from the dirty blue pickup truck there, entering the pine plantation. Mid-50s white man, a little pudgy, wearing a baggy beige cardigan and blue slacks. I feel pretty alert at this point. Feels out of place somehow. I take note, but pretend to keep walking around with my compass because I don't want to seem weird. I look at him, he pretends to ignore me. I'm getting a really bad gut feeling about the situation for some reason at this point, and I feel like he's following me. But I have an anxiety disorder, so I try not to freak out for zero reason, and I don't want to ruin my relaxation time. It's just a guy walking around, no big deal. To see if he's following me, I pivot 180 degrees and walk directly back to the trail. He's still following me. I walk through the bushes, onto the trail, still following me. At this point I was freaked out. The pine plantation entrance is only about 50 feet onto the trail, so this guy would have walked 50 feet, entered the pine plantation, then decided that was it for the day. Bad odds, definitely following me. I quickly exit the trail, and when I'm leaving the parking lot, I see that he's still looking at me. I take the long way home. The experience freaks me out, and I only visit the area once before the second encounter. This time it was January. This time, I want to go bird watching. The week prior, I had seen an owl in the same pine plantation. I was practicing navigation again, and I wanted to see it again. I'd seen it about an hour before sundown, so I figured that was a good time to try and see it again in the same area. I checked the parking lot and there was no blue pickup truck, but there were 2 other cars with men. One was a red sedan with heavily tinted windows, and it looked like the other one was empty. So, I go on the trail again. Today is muddy, wet, cold. The area should be totally empty. Good. Unfortunately, not so. About 20 feet on the trail, I hear footsteps behind me. I don't like when people walk behind me, but it's not a crime, and I'll lose them as soon as I go onto the pine plantation. I'm sure you know where this is going. When I walk onto the pine plantation, there's the same rustling in the bushes as before, and when I turn around, I see the same man from before. I feel a wave of terror and dread come over me, alone in a muddy forest with a possible stalker. But it's still so calm, and it feels so mundane. To confirm my fears, I walk over to the area where I saw the owl last week and pause to look for it. Who do I see next to me is the same freaking guy from before. I'm terrified at this point, and every part of me is screaming run, so I walk as fast as I can to the trail again. I pass some other random guy in the same pine plantation and smile at him, just totally on autopilot. He smiles back. It wasn't until I was in the parking lot where I get freaked out that there was a second person in the same pine plantation. Could they have been connected somehow? I stop briefly in the parking lot and take out a small notepad to quickly write down the license plates of the 2 cars. This gives the original man time to catch up to the parking lot. I'm booking it out on foot to the parking lot, and he yells towards me, "Can I give you a ride?" And I just shake my head and keep walking. As I walk away, he begins to follow me in his car. He waits at the intersection to see which direction I'm going in, and I decide to walk in a busy park to lose him. He pulls into a nearby hidden driveway and stares at me, and takes out his phone to presumably take a photo of me. He notes what direction I'm walking in, then does a U-turn and drives fast the other way. I took the long way home, filled out a police report, and the police opened an investigation on it. I've not gone back to the conservation area since, and the experience has definitely left me with an ongoing nervousness about being alone. Doubly more because I do not know who the second guy is. I passed him so quickly and only know that he was in his mid-50s and had glasses, and was bald. The police unfortunately told me there's nothing they can really do at this point, so the best I can do is stay vigilant and try not to let it freak me out too much. Unfortunately, this has totally ruined my love for going out into the wilderness alone. Nothing bad happened, but I think that was more because I was able to escape and lose him, or them, before anything did. To the random two almost stalkers, let's not meet. This happened about 3 years ago, and it's still one of the creepiest things that's ever happened to me. For background, I live in a city of just over 100,000 people. Not huge, but it has a lot of suburbs on the edge of town. I live near downtown, but my friend lived right near the middle of one of these suburbs. I was leaving her house at around 11:30 at night, and while I can't remember what day of the week it was, I remember not being terribly worried about running into anyone. From her house to mine was about 8 miles, and I was driving an e-bike, which is kind of like an electric moped that can only go 20 miles per hour. Since the speed limit was usually 25 to 30 in the city, I was used to seeing cars speeding around me. It was no big deal. Anyway, I leave her place and start driving home. The first half of the trip is uneventful, but as you get closer to downtown, the neighborhoods get rougher. Right around the halfway point, I'm parked in an intersection when I notice a kind of beat up red Sunfire behind me. I thought it was a bit weird that they didn't pull up beside me, since cars at intersections usually did. I kept to the right side like any other cyclist would. But e-bikes were pretty new in my town at that point, so I figured they just didn't know how much space to give me. The light changes and I drive on, and it takes me another 2 blocks to realise the car's not passing me. This is where I realised things were weird. The car was trailing behind me only 20 or 30 feet, and was coasting at 20 miles per hour, despite the fact that there were no other cars anywhere on the road, so overtaking me would be easy. It was weirding me out, but I figured they would get bored and move on eventually. A couple miles later, I started heading into downtown, and sure enough, the car was still following me. I could only see them in my mirrors, but I could tell there were at least 2 people in the car. So, I was outnumbered too. I started to get worried as I got closer to home, realizing that I'm going to have to stop eventually, and wondering what will happen when I do. My house, despite being near downtown, was on a quiet street that barely got any traffic, and wasn't very well lit. As I'm approaching a yellow light, I decide to risk running it to leave them behind at the red light. I turn left, only to be greeted by another red light. Thinking quick, I turn right on the red, but I can hear the squealing tires as the first light turns green and the car circles around the block, the way I didn't go, to meet up with me. At this point, I'm facing the car on a side street, dead on. I have 2 choices, drive towards the car or turn left. The car's not moving, instead waiting for me to make a decision. I turn left, as is the way towards my house, and the car calmly turns to follow me. At this point, I'm losing it. Even though it's cold, and I'm shaking like mad, I take out my cell phone and call my boyfriend. I know, I should have called the police, but I was freaking out. I tell him he had better get his ass outside of our place right now, because there's no way I'm stopping alone. At the same time, I'm describing the make and model of the car as best I can, while also trying not to crash. When the people in the car realize I'm on the phone, they decide to overtake me. As they do, I look over to see 2 men, rough looking, probably in their 30s. They're laughing their heads off, not in a what a fun joke, but in a cruel way, like they're going to get me no matter what. It's absolutely terrifying. I figured they thought I was calling the cops, so I start to calm down. They're still going pretty slow ahead of me, but at least they aren't following me anymore. As I'm coming up to the street I live on, I make sure to wait till they pass the intersection before I put on my right blinker, and they put on theirs. I turn onto my street as the tires squeal again, turning onto the street 1 block up. I know that they can go faster than me, and I contemplate trying to find somewhere to hide. I decide against it, Sure enough, as I come to the first intersection, their car is sitting perpendicular to me, waiting for me to pass by so they can follow again. It seemed like it was some kind of hilarious, cruel game to them, watching me try to get away and knowing they could always go faster. As we approached my house, I saw my boyfriend standing on the lawn, arms crossed and leering at the car. He wasn't good for much, but I'm glad as hell he was there. I pulled into the driveway, and as the car was halfway into the driveway as well, they finally saw him. They were gone before I could even turn my bike off. So, creepy, nasty men who decided I'd be their fun game for the night. Let's not meet. So, for the past year or so, I've been dating my boyfriend who lives a ways into town from my rural house. My parents just recently moved out to this super rural, nice but spread out neighbourhood about 15 minutes from the rest of our city and 30 minutes for the more urban part of the city, more restaurants, movie theatre, etc. I was working over the summer at a restaurant in this mall area where I often got off work at around 6. I would go to hang out at my boyfriend's at night until midnight, as I'm in college and I can get away with it. One night, my boyfriend and I accidentally fell asleep mid-movie viewing, and I woke up around 1:30 a.m. I desperately needed gas before driving home, so I hauled butt out of my boyfriend's house and stopped briefly at a gas station to fill up. Thank goodness, or the story would be a lot scarier, before I headed home. I knew I was stupid for being out so late, being a short girl in my 20s, but there was no real option. I got back on the highway from the gas station turnout and headed for the boonies where my house was. So, I should note here that the highway leading to the boonies where my house was narrows in the space of a few signals from 3 lanes to 1. It was fairly common to get oblivious out-of-towners going 30 miles per hour in a 50 zone on the 15-minute drive out to my house. So, I have a tendency of being semi-unflinching when it comes to passing people where the lanes taper down to 1 if they're going a few miles below the speed limit on the highway. In this case, I pulled up to a red light next to this nice white car. I think it was an Audi or a Lexus, but I can't remember. But definitely not sketchy looking or anything to me. I passed him as the lane slowly combined over the course of a few blocks as we headed into country from suburbia, because they were going about 10 miles below the speed limit on the highway. It wasn't as if I was driving aggressively, I simply happened to pass him in the second lane a few blocks before it merged into one. Anyway, I pull up to the right turn out of the middle of nowhere where I live, a long country road that basically has a bunch of random estates and horse properties. I sit at the last red light before rural roads, and the white car stops behind me. The only car on the road, which isn't necessarily strange, but it's a weekday and super late in a bedroom community. The light turns green and I drive out for about a mile, then turn left to head out on the 1-lane rural road leading to my far out neighbourhood. I'm going about 10 miles above the speed limit, about 50 miles per hour, the whole way, because I'm tired and I want to get home. And the whole time I'm watching the lone white car in my rear view, because I'm bored and I know this road like the back of my hand. He keeps slowing down to maybe 10 miles per hour slower, and then wandering over the white line in the middle of the road, then speeding up at the points in the road where he could pass me with brakes in the line to literally tailgate me at miles above the speed limit. I thought maybe he was drunk or something, again, totally possible on a weeknight. But instead of passing me while he rides my ass every time, he could have just gone by. He simply gets super close to my bumper in these areas. I'm starting to get annoyed and about 10 minutes of this goes by, and I pass the first of 3 entrances to my super rural neighbourhood. Now I'm starting to get a little weirded out, because whenever someone lives this far out, they tend to turn into this first entrance about 90% of the time. White car continues to follow me, and I kinda start to speed up because I'm weirded out when he doesn't turn in. I get to the 3rd entrance with him still behind me, and swing a left at semi-dangerous speeds and without any turn signal, because I figure I'll lose him around the curve and haul ass up the super steep, twisty hill towards my house. I think I'm good, until I look in my rear view and he's still about 10 yards behind me, no turn signal either. So, I fucking slam the pedal down going up the hill to my house, which is about a half mile or so long and insanely twisty. I'm basically counting on the unlikeliness of my fellow neighbours to be out this late as I book at about 20 miles above the normal speed. I've got water bottles and stuff flying around the back seat. I'm freaking myself out a little with the speed, but this guy is still right there behind me. I get to the left turn from my street and this guy is still glued to my tail. I'm starting to freak out and dialing my boyfriend on my cell as I make a snap decision not to turn into my driveway. It would be a solid 20-foot run to my front door, and I imagine it would be hard to get in the door in a panic in the country darkness. I always go on runs about the neighbourhood, so I know the roads well and past my house. turning right to head even further out into the country. The white car follows me still, as I'm careening around unevenly paved, hilly roads at about 50 miles per hour. I keep going straight, even as the road turns into a super uneven, unpaved dirt hill ahead, because I know it loops back to my street eventually. The second I hit the dirt road at about 50 miles per hour, my sturdy SUV starts lurching, but holding steady as I haul ass up the dirt hill, while yelling at my boyfriend that someone's following me. Luckily, the white car's headlights completely disappeared behind me, and I sped away and up to the right. I'm staring in my rear view the whole time while I shout to my boyfriend about how this guy followed me for 15 minutes in the middle of nowhere and then just disappeared. I have to assume the creeper was scared off by the dirt road overtaking the paved one, as the car he was driving was a really nice little city car that couldn't have handled the dirt roads at that speed. I ended up getting home without seeing his car again behind me, but I couldn't sleep for hours that night. I woke my mum up in a panic and she told me I shouldn't come home so late and that I should drive to a police station or something. But I was dumb and didn't realise. Also, I thought it was illegal to call the cops while driving because our state has a law against using cell phones while a vehicle is in motion. But yeah, it definitely reminded me of that advice where they say if you suspect you're being followed, keep turning right, because if he keeps following you, there's no question that they're actually following you in a circle.